If you want to make better, more realistic parks in Jurassic World Evolution 2, here are 10 elements your park facility area needs. Last time I showed you a realistic park entrance. This is where guests come into the park, but not where employees and supplies come into the park. Our staff arrives at the park via a second tunnel entrance. I've shown you how to make this tunnel opening with monorail tracks in the previous video, and as you can see, it creates a pretty convincing illusion, from some angles at least. If you want to have roads in your park, I think a tunnel opening like this is a must. Otherwise, where does the road lead to? Because there's no infrastructure connecting our parks to the land outside of the buildable area. The road that comes out of the tunnel leads in two different directions. The dock workers go one way and the park employees go the other way. Making a road in the game is pretty easy. I like using the narrowest gray path for the asphalt and then creating the dashed line with facility path. This dashed line unfortunately does have to be wider than I'd like it to be, but from above it creates the desired effect. The best finishing touch in my opinion is adding the biosyn lights at even intervals to mimic streetlights. To split the road 3 ways, I've created a simple roundabout with a fountain at the center. The employees that work at the docks or the supply area park their cars at the nearby parking lot. The parking lot for the guest area is much more complicated and decorated, whereas this one I wanted to build it as simply as possible to maximize the difference between the two and really make one feel fancy and the other one feel like, you know, the start of a long, hard day at work. The parking lot that starts a fun day versus the parking lot that starts a sucky day. So this parking lot is very simple to make and easy to keep small. You start with a standard road and then branch off minimum path lengths with the gray path. Each stretch of path is going to be a parking spot spaced out from the rest. Then with facility path, you fill in the space between each spot. This also squares off the ends of the gray path and creates a narrow pathway around the parking lot for foot traffic. I like adding the concrete barrier to each parking spot as a parking stop block or curb stop, whatever you want to call these. The parking lot leads directly to the supply area, and from there is a pedestrian access to the docks. The docks are my favorite part of this build for 2 reasons. The dock themselves, obviously, probably the reason why you're checking out this video, and something else. I have to warn you though, placing the docks alone took me an hour. I've made docks many times before, but what I typically just do is use the brown path and get the water as close as possible. However, there is a glitch with the benches you can exploit to create this effect instead, and I'll show you how. The benches can't be placed directly in water, but if you create a straight line between land and water, you can start the long, tedious task of placing the benches along the line as far into the water as the game allows. Before starting, I marked out with the snow brush what size and shape I wanted for my docks, but always remain flexible when working with glitches and accept that some trial and error might be in order to get the best effect. If you're going to do this, mentally prepare yourself because it is a really long process. Now for my project, I went with a pretty huge dock, because the story here is that sizable ships need to be able to dock to unload containers full of supplies for the park, maybe even dinosaurs too. But the bigger the dock, the more work, the more benches you need to place. So you might want to scale it down a bit to save yourself some time, and it'll probably look better too. Just be mindful not to go too small, because then you won't be able to get the water in between. I also ended up making the dock 3 benches wide in most places to make it make sense at that scale, but you don't need to do that. Your dock can just be a single line of benches. This will also save you a whole lot of time. Once you've placed your benches, you bring the water back in. There was one spot where the water didn't get all the way under the benches, and if I still had any patience left at that point, I might have moved some things around or tried to fix it some other way, but I had spent an hour placing benches. I was done. That being said, I'm really happy with the outcome, and I can only hope that in Jurassic World Evolution 3 there will be an easier way to achieve something like this. Credit for this cheat to create docks in this version of the game goes to Cretaceous Containment. I first saw them do this, so I think they discovered this, and that makes sense because they have discovered many great glitches in the game that I've showcased on the channel in previous videos. They did a showcase on this glitch months ago, but to be honest, I was like, too much trouble, too much work. So that's why I hadn't done it myself yet. But more recently, Crazy Cat Mary, a fellow non-modded builder, used the technique to create docks for her Hogwarts park, and that had me like, okay, yeah, I need to do this for my realistic park. Damn it. So shout out to both of these creators, their channels are linked below for you to check out. But as I said, there's another thing about the docks that I was really happy with. And it's really simple, it's really small, so please don't laugh at me. But it's this little area where newly arrived containers can be weighed and scanned. I did this by putting in a rectangle of a different path color and then lining it on both sides with a lot of the biosyn lights. As a big park, you want to make sure that when your shipment comes in, you actually get what you ordered and you're not being shortchanged on prime steak for your dinosaurs. So this is where they can weigh and scan the containers that come in. I thought it was a nice little touch of storytelling that I wanted to share with you. Make your docks a little bit more interesting. After the containers have been unloaded from the ships, they are moved to the storage area. The large containers are stored here, with a checkpoint at each entry so they can make sure the administration is in order. And there are 2 access points, one right outside the gate to the docks, and one a little further down because of course supplies can also arrive via trucks that come in through the tunnel. The area itself is very simple. I think we've all made areas like this many times in our parks. The only tip I can give you is to go through the trouble of mixing the container colors. I think a random mix looks much more realistic than a color-coordinated storage area. Smaller supplies when leaving the docks go to the left, where I've placed power plants to mimic warehouses. The power plants are just the most boxy looking building that I think works quite well, and it's an excuse for me to use this building because I pretty much never use it otherwise as a sandbox player. So that covers one half of the park facility area, but there is another half. A big area is dedicated to a medical facility for the dinosaurs of the park. So we have the Paleo Medical Center, some recovery/quarantine pens, and an ACU team nearby for security and lifting the larger animals to and from their habitats. But of course, any smaller species would realistically be transported by truck, not via airlift. For that reason, it's important the medical area of the park has a direct access road leading into the park. I want to incorporate access roads throughout the entire park, so dedicated paths for the rangers and other park employees to use. That's definitely going to be challenging. That's something you need to be mindful of at every step of building your park, so stay tuned to see if I can actually make that work. And of course, subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss any content, like hopefully soon news about Jurassic World Evolution 3. Something else for the future of this park is a composting area. I tried adding that to the medical facility, but I just don't have the space here to make what I wanted to make, so I changed my mind. Because what I want to make is a large composting area nearby a bit of a farm, so the park can use the dinosaurs' dung to fertilize the prehistoric crop that they use to feed the herbivorous dinosaurs. If you have the right space for it, you could add it right beside all your other facilities, but I'm going to build that next to a suitable habitat instead. I'm thinking next to a large habitat with sauropods, possibly, because they would logically produce a lot of droppings. And then those smelly droppings don't have to be transported through the entire park to get to the composting facility. The 8th element in my facility area is a separate parking lot for the 9th element, which is staff housing. I think a separate section with staff housing makes most sense when you are building a park on a remote island, and obviously for this park we are pretending that it's nearby civilization enough that both guests and staff can drive to the park. However, I still wanted to include it, not just to show you guys, but also when my sister did her internships for resorts and hotels, she would live on site in cheap housing for international employees. I think a world-renowned dinosaur park would definitely have accommodations for staff to live nearby so they can attract employees from all over the world and offer international internships, especially if you consider your parks as part of a large worldwide franchise of parks, and there might be an exchange program of employees to share experience and knowledge between parks. Also, I'd imagine that something like paleo veterinarian care is a pretty specific field and not too many people have studied that, so yeah, you might be flying in doctors from all over the world to take care of a sick animal you might have. The final element is a pedestrian connection between the staff facilities and the park, so the employees can easily get into the park. Using the bench glitch, I made a bridge across the river. Thank you so much for watching, liking, subscribing, and until next time, enjoy the game.